Caleb shouted on top of his voice. "No! This can't happen, Felix, it can't be you, new brother," he cried bitterly. "This can't be real." Caleb fell on the floor crying bitterly at the top of his voice. Nkechi the housemaid heard Caleb's voice. She rushed into the sitting room with Simon and found Mr. Caleb on the floor crying bitterly about his brother's death. She screamed, "What's is the problem, Mr. Caleb? I heard your loud voice while in the kitchen. What could be the problem, sir?" Mr. Caleb, still in tears, responded while in pain, "Nkechi, Mr. Felix, and his wife are dead. I just saw a breaking news about the plane they just boarded. It crashed not too far from Magodo due to shortage of fuel, and there was no survival." Nkechi shouted, "Jesus, this can't happen, new ogre Felix," she cried uncontrollably, holding her head with her two hands. Down the memory lane, Felix was a man with great steeze and composure. He was the CEO of Standard Bank of Africa, one of the prominent banks in the city of Magodo. Aside from the bank, Mr. Felix had several businesses and investments. He was a don in real estate, with several real estate properties in every nook and cranny of the country, under the flagship of Standard Homes. Mr. Felix was honestly rich. He had wealth in abundance. He invested massively in oil and gas, partnering with the government of Magodo to help refine their oil, which made him the owner of a leading refinery in the country. Mr. Felix had several fleets of cars of different specs. He fancied Toyota cars so much, he was always out to drive the latest Toyota car in town. Mr. Felix was a great philanthropist. He built schools and several homes for the homeless. He was fond of donating to the motherless baby homes every month. He awarded several scholarships to students in Magodo to further help his community. Mr. Felix hosted several skill acquisition programs, inviting experts from different countries to help train and equip people in Magodo with skills. Felix was married to Uju. Felix and Uju's wedding was the talk of the town. The wedding ceremony was graced by several government officials in Magodo, top celebrities in Magodo, and even the esteemed president of Magodo, His Excellency Dr. Shola Allison, was present himself. Felix and Uju were lovebirds. The couple fancied going on vacation more than anything else. They were fond of visiting several tourist centers every week irrespective of the distance. Their marriage lasted for 4 years before Madame Uju, Mr. Felix's wife, gave birth to a bouncing baby boy named Simon. Simon was fair in complexion. He was indeed a bright kid. He had everything a child could ever think of. Simon was given preferential treatment. Simon had a maid named Nkechi. Nkechi was responsible for the welfare of Simon. She was charged with the responsibility of feeding him, bathing him, and also making sure Simon was always neat and ready for school every morning. Simon was loved dearly by his parents. He accompanied his parent to every vacation, provided school wasn't in season. Simon was indeed a source of hope to Mr. and Mrs. Felix. His father, Mr. Felix, believed so much in him. Mr. Felix will always look Simon straight in the eye whenever he comes back from work. "Simon, my son, I believe so much in you. I so much believe someday you will take over from me. I am doing my best to make sure you live a life of abundance, and I believe you will someday oversee all my companies and properties. You are my pride, Simon, and I honestly love you dearly, son, and I will be alive to see you grow into a full-grown man." Mr. Felix will always kiss and embrace Simon gracefully anytime he makes this statement. Mr. Felix is the son of Madame Beatrice. Madame Beatrice was a notable food seller in Kafanchan, one of the major cities in Magodo. Madame Beatrice was well known in Kafanchan for her sweet delicacies. She sold rice, soup, and yam porridge. Madame Beatrice also sold cakes and several varieties of snacks and drinks. Her restaurant is indeed one of the biggest restaurants in the city of Kafanchan. Felix's mum, Madame Beatrice, had several co-workers who assisted her in attending to customers. She was honestly a big madam. Her restaurant was indeed a relaxation center for several people after work. Bankers patronized Madame Beatrice greatly. And even her dear son Felix was fond of ordering food from her. Madame Beatrice had 2 sons, Felix and Caleb. She lost her husband 2 years ago to a ghastly motor accident. Felix, who was Simon's father, was the eldest son of Madame Beatrice. He took sole responsibility of taking care of Caleb, his brother, after their father's death. Mr. Felix's brother Caleb left his mother, Madame Beatrice, in Kafanchan, and moved into Mr. Felix's luxurious mansion in Magodo to live with him and his family. Caleb was Mr. Felix's head manager at his real estate company. He supervised Mr. Felix's business and properties whenever he was on vacation with his family. One fateful day in the city of Magodo, Mr. Felix went to work. He was in his office watching TV when the advertisement for Queen Elizabeth National Park, a popular tourist center in Uganda, caught his attention. Mr. Felix was marveled by the beauty and artistic masterpiece of Queen Elizabeth National Park in Uganda. Wow, what a beautiful place to be, nice features. I must visit this place with my family, Mr. Felix said. Mr. Felix quickly picked his phone and called his Uju, his wife. Honey, I have seen a place we could visit for our next vacation. You will honestly like it, my dear. It's actually the popular Queen Elizabeth National Park situated in Uganda. Uju, I will gist you when I come back home from work. Give me some time to finish my work for today. Felix pleaded. That fateful day Mr. Felix hurriedly returned home from work. He was very anxious to break the news to his wife. He entered his living room. Uju, his wife, was so happy to see him. She embraced him tightly. Welcome, my husband. She embraced him. Uju was indeed happy to see her husband back home. Simon was also happy to see his father back from work. With joy in his heart, Simon embraced his father. Welcome, Dad. Let me help you with your bag. Simon took the bag from his father's hand and rushed to his room to drop it. Caleb, Mr. Felix's brother, was also in the living room. He welcomed Mr. Felix. Welcome, brother. Uju whispered to her husband, Honey, why not freshen up, so I can bring you your food once you're done taking your bath? Felix agreed. He quickly removed his clothes and rushed into the bathroom to freshen up before coming to the dining table. After taking his bath, Mr. Felix joined Uju, Simon, and Caleb at the dining table. The dining table was already set. Mr. Felix sat comfortably glancing at the dining table. Uju called upon Nkechi, their maid, to dish Mr. Felix food. Nkechi, please dish my husband's food. Okay, madam, Nkechi responded. Yes, Nkechi dished the food. Mr. Felix was so engrossed in their forthcoming tour to Uganda. Mr. Felix spoke immensely about Queen Elizabeth National Park. He also spoke about the rich culture of Uganda, drawing from the TV documentary he watched. Mr. Felix's wife Uju and Caleb, Felix's brother, were also engrossed in the discussion. They both smiled brightly as Mr. Felix spoke boastfully about their next trip to Uganda. Honey, I really can't wait to be in Uganda with you by my side, Mr. Felix said as he held Uju's hands. Gently, the two of them felt a deep connection. We will be spending over 2 weeks in Uganda. I will make reservations for our hotel. I hope that's okay with you, Mr. Felix asked Uju. Uju was not in agreement with her husband. She hesitated. She considered Simon her son. His school was still in session and it would be bad for Simon to miss school. Simon, their son, was 10 years old. He had just started junior secondary school at St. Peter Anglican School. Simon has always been part and parcel of every tour. He has always accompanied his parents to every tour, regardless of if school was in session. But considering Simon's new class and the duration of the tour to Uganda, Uju, his mother, was bothered, so she responded to her husband. Honey, won't 2 weeks be too much? And can't we shift this tour till the end of the month? I'm considering Simon's education. You know, he has just been promoted to junior secondary school and it will be unfair for him to miss school at this earlier stage. Mr. Felix nodded. I understand you, dear, but I honestly want to visit Uganda. You know what, honey, we could leave Simon behind. Nkechi, the house help, and Caleb, my brother, will be here to take care of him. I promise we'll take him with us on our next tour at the end of the term. For Simon's sake, all our upcoming tours will be scheduled at the end of the term. Simon, upon hearing his dad's statements, was not happy. He cried bitterly. Dad, no, I want to follow you, he wailed. His father embraced him. Simon stopped crying. His father cleared his tears with his hands. Don't worry, I promise to take you to Uganda by month's end when your school is not in session. I am giving you my word, son. Simon stopped crying. He saw sincerity in his father's words. He agreed to stay back, considering his academics. But Dad, I will honestly miss you and Tema. Felix smiled gracefully. Don't worry, son, it's just for 2 weeks. Notwithstanding, me and your mum will always call every day to check up on you. Mr. Felix looked at Caleb, his brother, gracefully. Brother, you will supervise my businesses and properties. For the next 2 weeks I will be away. I believe you are conversant with everything I do with regards to my business. Caleb nodded in agreement. No problem, brother. I will do my best. Over the next day, Mr. Felix bought 2 flight tickets for himself and his wife. Their flight was scheduled at 10 a.m. on Saturday, which was the next day. 9 a.m. the next day, Mr. Felix and his wife were well dressed with their luggages packed outside. They were ready to go. Tunde, Mr. Felix's driver, took their luggages, which he loaded into the boot of a black Toyota Corolla car, owned by Mr. Felix. While Tunde was getting the Toyota car ready, Mr. Felix embraced Simon, his son, in front of their mansion. Nkechi, their maid, and Caleb were also outside to bid them farewell. They both watched as Mr. Felix embraced Simon so dearly. They both knew Simon would honestly miss his parent, because this was the first time Simon will stay back while his parents were on vacation. Nkechi felt for Simon, though she believed Simon's academics was of more priority than any vacation or tour. Nkechi watched closely as Mr. Felix embraced his son. Tunde, the driver, was also watching Mr. Felix and his wife closely. Mr. Felix held his son's hands as he looked closely into his eyes. Son, me and your mum will miss you. Ensure you be a good boy. We will always call every day to check up on you. As Mr. Felix and Uju spoke to their son Simon, Tunde, the driver, signaled. Oga Felix, time don day go. Remember your flight now 10 a.m. Make we do fast so we go catch up in time. Upon hearing Tunde's voice, Mr. Felix and his wife left Simon. They quickly entered the car. Simon wept and wailed. He shouted and cried while Tunde drove the black Toyota car off. Nkechi, the maid, grabbed Simon to help prevent him from running after the car. She consoled him and cleared his tears as she waved at the car, bidding farewell to Mr. Felix and Uju. Caleb also waved at the car, telling his brother goodbye. Tunde drove Mr. Felix and his wife to the airport. They got to the airport at about 9:30 a.m. Tunde quickly offloaded the luggages from the boot of the car. He then took the luggages to the airport terminal for inspection. Mr. Felix and his wife followed him happily at the airport terminal. Tunde was about to go. He looked at his boss cheerfully. Oga Felix, I don day go. Make Una take care. Emma. Felix and his wife were honestly pleased with Tunde. They thanked him. As a point of gratitude, Mr. Felix gave Tunde some money, just to appreciate Tunde's effort. Tunde, thank you. I'm indeed grateful, Mr. Felix said. No worry, Oga. Na my work. I'm always at your service anytime. They both exchanged pleasantries. Uju watched closely. Tunde waves at them. Oga Felix, bye-bye. Tunde, the driver, drove the black Toyota car back to the house, after dropping Mr. Felix and Uju at the airport. Mr. Felix and his wife took the first flight to Uganda. The flight was scheduled to last for 3 hours. About 1 hour after Mr. Felix and his wife left, Caleb was watching the TV when he saw a breaking news about a plane crash. He was in shock. He went closer to the TV set to see if it was the plane his brother just boarded. Lo and behold, the plane that crashed was Vika Airline. This was the plane Felix and his wife boarded not quite long. Caleb shouted on top of his voice, "No, this can't happen. Felix, it can't be you, no. Brother," he cried bitterly. "This can't be real." Caleb fell on the floor crying bitterly at the top of his voice. Nkechi, the housemaid, heard Caleb's voice. She rushed into the sitting room with Simon and found Mr. Caleb on the floor crying bitterly about his brother's death. She screamed, "What is the problem, Mr. Caleb? I heard your loud voice while in the kitchen. What could be the problem, sir?" Mr. Caleb, still in tears, responded while in pain, "Nkechi, Mr. Felix, and his wife are dead. I just saw a breaking news about the plane they just boarded. It's crashed not too far from Magodo due to shortage of fuel, and there was no survival." Nkechi shouted, "Jesus, this can't happen, no." Simon, upon hearing the breaking news, started crying. "No, Dad and Mum can't be dead. Uncle Caleb, let's go to the site to confirm if truly they are dead since the plane crashed not too far from Magodo," Simon said. "Yes," Mr. Caleb responded, "that's a good suggestion. Let's visit where the plane crashed. Let's confirm if truly it was the plane boarded by Mr. Felix and his wife." Immediately, Mr. Caleb called Tunde, the driver, to get the car ready. He narrated what had just happened to Tunde. The news was also a big shock to Tunde. Tunde shouted, "This na bad news, oh." He placed his hands on his head, shouting sorrowfully. Tunde immediately ignited the vehicle. Mr. Caleb, Nkechi, and Simon jumped into the car. As they were set to confirm if the crashed plane was truly the plane Mr. Felix and his wife boarded not too long. They drove with speed heading towards Kafanchan to see for themselves if truly it was true. From the breaking news, it was revealed that the plane crashed in Kafanchan. This was the exact place Mr. Felix's mum Madam Beatrice was living. Madam Beatrice also heard about the plane crash that happened. It was all over Kafanchan that a plane had just crashed at Aluyode, a popular town in Kafanchan. She was in shock. She remembered her son Felix told her about his forthcoming tour to Uganda. But she was not sure of the airline he boarded. Madam Beatrice hurriedly took her phone and called Caleb, her second son, to confirm from him. Caleb, her son, was not with his phone. He rushed out of the house in haste, forgetting his phone on the table due to the breaking news about the Vika plane crash. Madam Beatrice was honestly worried because Caleb, her son, was not picking her call. So she resolved to visit Aluyud, the town where the plane crashed, to see for herself. Madam Beatrice stopped a taxi at the front of her shop. "Taxi," she shouted as she signaled to a vehicle to stop. A taxi stopped in front of her. The driver of the taxi was an old man wearing a blue Yoruba traditional cap. He asked Madam Beatrice, "Madam, where you dey go?" Madam Beatrice replied softly. She was still in shock, though she was yet to confirm if truly her son Felix was part of the plane that just crashed in Aluyode. "Please, Baba, can you take me to the exact place where the plane crashed?" The taxi driver nodded. "No problem, madam. Your money now 800 shillings. Madam Beatrice responded, "No problem, I will pay." She hurriedly entered the taxi and the taxi drove off speedily heading towards Aluyode where the plane crashed. On her way to Oloid, to confirm if truly the crashed plane was the plane her son boarded, the taxi developed a mechanical fault. The taxi driver parked the vehicle beside road, trying to see if he could fix the problem. Madam Beatrice was devastated. She shouted at the taxi driver, "Oga driver, what is the problem? I'm running out of time here. Why didn't you repair your vehicle before bringing it out to carry passengers?" she hissed at the taxi driver bluntly. The taxi driver responded, "Madam, I beg you go calm down. I'm always concerned about my vehicle's well-being, and I always ensure it's in good working condition. I'm surprised this happened. Please, madam, give me some time to check where the fault is coming from. I promise it won't take time. I'm indeed sorry for the delay." Madam Beatrice nodded in acceptance. "No problem, driver," although she was still angry. In 5 minutes, the taxi driver fixed the vehicle. He was ready to go, so he signaled Madam Beatrice to get into the car. "Please, madam, I'm done. You can enter the car. Sorry for the delay." Madam Beatrice responded politely, "No problem, I understand, sir." She hurriedly entered the car. The taxi driver ignited the car. He drove with speed heading towards the venue where the plane crashed. Watch out for part 2. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting African stories. I honestly got you covered. Thanks for your time.